My name is Miss Aliyah Judge, the PRO of the St. Andrews Development Organization. We're finally in the month of February, so I'd like to extend happy 50th independence to everyone here. Theme: one people, one journey, one future. I would like to say a warm welcome to the Honorable Dr. Decima Williams, President of the Senate, Dr. Curtis Jacobs, historian, and everyone present here today, as well as our online viewers extended to the diaspora. With pleasure, I was given the opportunity to welcome the chair of the subcommittee for history, identity, heritage, and documentation, Miss Wendy Grenada. This committee is a subcommittee of the National Independence Organizing Committee. So, let's have a conversation, and once again, happy 50th independence to everyone.
Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for welcoming us to St. Andrew. And I too would like to recognize the Honorable Dr. Decima Williams, President of the Senate, and to all our friends here and to those viewing online. Welcome to this, what I would like to call an intergenerational dialogue on the independence theme: one people, one journey, one future. And why is this important? You know, at independence time, we like to think about eating oil down and going to fetes and enjoying ourselves as we know how to do. But it's also important to take the opportunity to talk among ourselves about ourselves. And this is what we want to do this evening. I have here with me Dr. Curtis Jacobs, who is a renowned historian. And before we have that dialogue, I want to invite Dr. Jacob to just speak to us briefly about Grenada's history, the critical moments in our historical journey, and what are the implications for where we are now, 50 years of political independence. Dr. Curtis Jacobs.
Yes. Good afternoon, good evening, Dr. Wendy. I thank you for inviting me to this event. I'm not so sure about the renowned part, but I am definitely a historian. And the history of Grenada, I would like to put it in perspective. Human beings have been living in this place for at least 5,000 years. What we know for sure is only for the last 520 years. The history of the people who lived before Columbus sighted Grenada and called it Concepcion, we know hardly anything about them except for what we find in places like pearls and other parts of Grenada, but we don't know who did them. We don't know the identities of those who left those artifacts. So the point is, when we talk about independence, we're talking about developments which took place in during a very tiny period of the history of Grenada, about 500 years or so, the last 550 years or so. That is what we have to deal with. Now, Grenada is until the 6th of February, midnight of the 6th of February 1974, was what you would call a geographical expression. It was an appendage, a piece or a part of a larger political organization, which in this case was Great Britain. And on the midnight of the 6th of February 1974, Grenada had officially severed its relationship with Great Britain. Officially, I said. But for us to understand what independence is, we have to understand what we were before. And we were what was called a colony. Now, a colony is a place, a territory, as sometimes we would call it in political science terms, a polity, P-O-L-I-T-Y, which was established by another country and which exists in what is called a political dependence with that original place, as we would call it now commonly, a mother country. Now, in the history of Grenada since, let's say, 1498, we've had at least maybe 2 mothers, or maybe 3. You might say we had Spain, but Spain was a kind of a recalcitrant and absentee kind of parent, right? We didn't know anything. I mean, Columbus just passed in the waters outside of St. George's and say, Concepcion. But he didn't land. He didn't stick a flag into Grenada's beach, and he didn't say, well, this belongs to Spain, right? And it took several years after until the French arrived around the 1600s. And then they called it La Grenade, not to be confused with Wendy Grenade. But Grenade means a grenade, a shell of exploding seeds, a bomb. And maybe the way how the shape of Grenada, it looks like a hand grenade. And we'll have to credit the English for calling it Grenada. Because when Grenada was captured by the British in 1762 during those colonial wars, in this case was the 7 Years' War, Grenada was captured on the 3rd of March 1762, and some say that Swanton and Monkton sailed into St. George's without firing a shot. And Grenada became British and from then, so all those names you see in St. George's, you see Gore Street. Do you know who Gore was? Gore was a military governor who ruled Grenada between 1762 and 1763, right? So the place names we have in St. George's in particular evoke some part of our colonial history. So by 1763, February, I think it was, the official government of Grenada was established or proclaimed by the British government. And that particular polity or that geographical expression was composed of Grenada, the island, the Grenadines, St. Vincent, Dominica, and Tobago. And as George Besant wrote later, that the parochialism and the insularity of the other peoples, the peoples in the other territories, they said, no, we want our own thing. So by 1771, Grenada becomes what it is today. The island Grenada encompassing the island of Carriacou and all the islands south of that island. So that is what we know to be Grenada today, is what was established in 1771 and remains that way to this day, right? Now, Grenada is the history of Grenada from, let's say, 1498 or maybe 1649, depends on where you want to look, is really the struggle against three issues or forces. The first one is the struggle against colonial rule and the struggle against slavery. Now, when Columbus arrives in 1498, he establishes 2 things. He established colonial rule and he established slavery. So the 7th of February 1974 is the formal end of two major struggles which have dominated Grenada's history from 1649 or 1498, I prefer, until 1962. So the struggle against slavery lasted permanently until 1834, and the struggle against colonial rule formally ends on the 6th of February, 1974. So independence is really a big thing. It is an important break in our history, our modern history, which began in, let's say, 1498. So it is really an important occasion for us to observe and to celebrate our successes and learn from our reverses and our failures and so on. So the third one is the one which we're living with today. We are living with the accumulated effects of what is called in the jargon, the plantation system. We're struggling with that. The language that we speak today is English. That's a legacy of it. Our politics, our languages, the people. When you look around, if you look around us, the origins of the people who we see around us, they are not from Grenada. They are from several thousand miles to the east of us, right? They're from Africa, generally speaking. And there's a reason why we are here. There's a reason why we have the names that we have. There's a reason why we speak the language that we speak. It all has to do with what happened in 1498, 1649, 1762. All these are the important benchmark years in Grenada's modern history. Now, as I was telling to somebody, there are several important dates which change and around which our history in Grenada turn. The most important one I like to think about is the 3rd of March. Now, the 3rd of March is the capture of Grenada by Monckton and, who was the other one? Monckton was one, right? Now, the 3rd of March is the capture of Grenada by Britain in 1762. The 3rd of March, 1795 is the beginning of Fedon's Rebellion. And I have to recognize that Julian Fedon, when he launched his revolt against British rule, that was uppermost. It was a revolt against British rule. And in the 20th century, the 3rd of March is associated status. And I remember in 2013, there was this election which took place a few weeks or a few days before, and the new government installed its government in the National Stadium on the 3rd of March, 2013. They're looking on TV, and I said, these people don't quite understand their history. They are sitting in the National Stadium, which is overlooking Cherry Hill, which is, of course, where Jacques Chirac was hanged and his body left to rot in chains. Nobody noticed. I said, well, how come? Now, that's one of the days around the pivots around the history of Grenada turn. Another interesting one is January 21. What happens on January 21? Really loaded, the birth of Tubal Uriah Butler, the birth of Alistair Hughes, Bloody Monday, January 21. Right? That's the day when King Louis XIV, Louis XVI was guillotined in France, and which makes Fedon's Rebellion possible. Grenada has these lovely days on which our history turns, some very important dates. And what happens? The struggle against slavery ended in 1834, and I like to say that is the beginning of the modern history of Grenada. That's when those who were enslaved became emancipated, and Grenada we became what is called, quote, free, unquote, and we began to have the evolution of the society which we know today, right? So by 1857, we've had some other developments, like we had Indians arrived. I forgot to say this. The Africans were brought, most of them. They were brought. Now, being brought has an entirely different connotation and implication than if you came. And the reason why my name is Jacobs today and why Professor Grenada's name is what it is, and everybody else here, is because we were brought. And I remember having to tease Rex Nettleford some years ago. We were in a conference and he said, oh, the Africans came. And I went to say, Professor, I have to tease you. The Africans didn't come, they were brought, right? But because that being brought has a different connotation and implication to coming. So the Europeans came, the Madeirans came, even the Barbadians came in the 19th century, even the Africans who came after 1808 under Palmerston's Atlantic Squadron. An important development for those who, anybody here is from Munich Conference, by the way? Anybody? Munich Conference? Extremely important place or places. Why? Because a group of Africans, several hundred of them came, they were captured on the high seas by the British, and they were given a choice. They were meant to be slaves in Brazil, and the British said, you have a choice. You either go back to where you come from or you stay here. And if you stay, you work as indentured servants. But I think they came when slavery was still in place. So the British put them in a far place to the northeast, conference on Munich, so that they would not come into regular contact with Africans who were still enslaved. But the people at conference on Munich, as Norman Paul's work would talk about, Dark Puritan, a lot of it is Grenada is important for that heavy African retentions, which of the people in conference on Munich kept, even I think to this day. So Grenada is complicated, long, very interesting. I think I may have overstayed my time by now. But the point is that perhaps we could have some more discussions during the question and answer time. But the point is that Grenada has a very interesting history, and I used to have an argument with a particular person of another Caribbean country, and I said, your country's history is not even a patch on the history of Grenada. Because Grenada, and why we don't know so much about Grenada's history is a combination of we not knowing, people who don't want us to know, and what should I say? Just plain, we're not interested. I like the idea of people thinking about the history of Grenada on this 50th anniversary. And we haven't even discussed that yet. And if you give me a minute or two, the history of Grenada after 1974 has two general phases, but maybe three. So 1974 to 1979, which will be, as Richard Jacobs would say, Grenada, the route to revolution. 1979 to 1983 is the revolution, or the beginning of it. And 1983 to the present time, I call it Ronald Reagan's Pax Americana, meaning that Ronald Reagan gave Grenada an American peace. I think it's an uneasy peace, but That's what we have been living in Grenada since 1983. We're living under Ronald Reagan's American Peace. And that itself has its own dynamics, but we could talk about it later. Thank you for that opportunity.
Thanks very much, Dr. Jacobs, for helping us to look back. Because when we think about one people, one journey, one future, we have to ask ourselves, what is this tapestry of diversity that brings together one people with one journey, with one future? And as some of us have been saying over the last couple of weeks, one people does not at all suggest sameness or some homogeneous oneness. It's about how do we find a common thread despite diversity, despite different ethnicities, despite how we are positioned in the social strata in terms of class and so forth, what it means, tongue and country and all of that. There's a complexity that we have to work through to find unity in diversity. And I think when we ask ourselves, what does it mean to be Grenadian? And last evening we were in GBSS and we were discussing this question. And I would pose it to the audience and we would engage. Some argue that because we are economically dependent, we cannot be, I see Claude Douglas is looking at me, we cannot be politically independent. And I like to disagree with that. Because there's no country in the world that I know that is totally economically independent. What we have interdependence. The United States and China, they have what is called in the literature a complex interdependence. And what does that mean? Your trade relations are tied up. Your financial flows are tied up. Your strategic interests are tied up. So you have a complex interdependence. For those of us in the developing world, coming from plantation economy, coming from colonialism, it means our economies, we were producing to satisfy the comparative advantage of Britain, or in some cases France, as the case may be. What then did that mean when we became independent? We entered a world economy, a capitalist world economy, that was not designed for countries like ours. So economic dependency is a reality. Does that mean that we are not independent? Now, I like to distinguish between the nation and the state. And I know my brother, Dr. Ian Batiste, is here. Because on the 7th of February, as Curtis Jacob is saying rightly, Grenada did not drop from the sky on the 7th of February. When we gained the statehood, when we became a sovereign state, we already had a nation. How fractured, perhaps. How imagined, perhaps. But a nation. We were already cooking oil down and saying oil before we became a sovereign state. What did the nation bring to the state? And George Brizan's book about an island of conflict is a reality. But in the midst of the political conflicts that we've had through time, Madam President, something else was happening in the society. A village was still raising a child. We still had a sense of community. So when we think about the society, the polity, and the economy, there's a complexity. So we're coming toward that moment of independence with all of who we are, or religion, or faith, our history of overcoming, our resilience, our fears, yet our courage. So we come into independence with a nation imagined or real. And I want, as we open the floor, I want to ask us, who are we? What does it mean to be Grenadian? How do we identify? How do we self-define? If you walk in down Brooklyn or in Toronto, you see somebody. Something happens because you jump. It's a face you would remember from primary school or something. And you share something and you can't define what it is. It's about something common, that common thread, despite the tapestry of diversity, despite the conflict and contradictions. Who are we? So I want us to have an intergenerational conversation. I know we have some young students from TAMCC here, and I want to thank them. And we had 2 very young students, I think they left. We want to be able to discuss, to speak about one people, one journey, one future, and the nuances of that. And importantly, we want to ask ourselves, where should we be going in the next 50 years? What Grenada do we want to leave for my little niece who is just 3 years old in hope? What kind of Grenada do we want to leave? In terms of our economy, our society, our polity, the environment, I want us to just talk about ourselves, among ourselves. So I'm opening the floor now. What does independence mean? How do you feel about independence? What are some of the lessons that we can learn about what should independence mean? Anybody? Feel free. We have a mic in the middle. It's a nice little intimate audience, and we'll speak among ourselves about ourselves. So it's time for me to hush and to invite anybody to just share. Share a good memory about Grenada. Share some of our accomplishments. What have we done well in the last 50 years? What are the gaps? What do we need to do better? What's the unfinished business with independence? What are some of the unfinished business that we have with independence? Yes? So let's talk among ourselves. And we welcome all of you viewing online. I wouldn't want to call on anybody, but I want...
Oh, Professor Wendy, though, before we,
Yes.
I want to take you up on another matter about independence. It is true that independence came to what is called the formerly colonized world from about the 1940s, India and so on. But you're right, it came because people became independent. The United States became independent in 1783. Haiti became independent in 1804. Yeah, but what is so classical about it? The point about it here is that the role that we wish to play was not the role that we have been, quote, traditionally, unquote, been placed in the international order, hence independence. And in our Grenadian history, we're going to have to look at the period of 1979 to 1983, when the leaders of Grenada's government at that time articulated that matter. You hear them talking about neo-colonialism, talking about imperialism, you hear about all these different issues. And in many respects, Grenada during the revolution was a kind of a history lesson, political lesson to the people. I don't think that what happened after October of 1983 could possibly have wiped out what had taken place between March of 1979 and October of 1983. Some things have remained, and Grenada has a different understanding of itself as of March 12, 1979, let's say. And I don't think the people who have lived in Grenada since March 13th, 1979 until now could forget. I like to remember I met, in the course of living in Grenada, I met two sets of people, or three people. Two of them related, they carry the same family name. And the first one said, the revolution, that was a terrible time. So that'd be somewhere around 2004, 2005. This time it was 2016, 2017. And that person's relative revolution, it was a terrible time. Now, those two people related, and they have a certain socioeconomic class. Or the other one, he said, revolution, that was the best time we had. Who is right and who is wrong?
Right, and if I may, pardon me?
By the way, the two who said it was a terrible time, they have both passed. The one who said it was the best time, he's still alive.
No, I want to get back to independence, but on the question of the Grenada Revolution, we're having an academic conference in October, later this year. And one of the panels, we want to speak about 4.5 in 50. And 4.5 in 50 would allow us to critique that period, because I always say it was the best of times and the worst of times. So I think I'm agreeing with both of the people that you're speaking about. But I want to say something about independence before I open the floor. For those who argue that we are not independent, I want to differ, because sovereignty, as compromised as it is in the context of small states exercising their sovereignty in the context of unequal global power, unfair trade, unequal relations, that's how we exercise our sovereignty. That does not mean that we are not a legitimate member of the international communities. And Sister Gloria Payne said it well. She said, if we were not independent, Karani James could not have won a gold medal as a Grenadian. He would have had to run as a British subject.
Yes, Britain might have won, yes, not Grenada.
And Britain would
yes,
have won.
yes.
And the truth is, a sovereign state means that you have a legal personality. You could sign a treaty. That does not mean that everything is right with your economy. You're still dependent economically. And there's a lot that you have to work through. How then do you use your sovereignty? And that is why, for example, regionalism becomes important. Global partnerships would become important to ensure that you maximize the sovereignty that you have. But even if you are a small state in a world of great powers, that does not at all mean you're not independent. And it's a very complex world where if you know how to have strategic diplomacy, how to engage in strategic partnerships, you can leverage. When you look at how Grenada operates in the multilateral fora, the Caribbean countries have really punched above their weight in a lot of areas in climate change. When we talk about small states and how small states have really championed certain issues. So it is not all hopeless. How then does that translate to us as citizens? What does independence mean for how we live? For how we see ourselves, so how we govern ourselves domestically? And what could we do better? So I think we've spoken enough here. We want to hear from you. What does independence mean to you? What can we do better? What are the gaps and limitations? What is there to celebrate? And there is a lot to celebrate. And what should the future be? Floor is open. Yes, please. Just you can. The mic is right there because we want those online to follow. You say your name and you ask your question or you make your comment. I didn't make it. emanates from a discussion online on Facebook. At point somebody raised, why are we adding more nutrition to the 50th anniversary celebration? I am confused. That's what the individual is saying. So I want you to comment, if you can just comment as to why the revolutionary period on the 50th anniversary, if there's a connect,
A connection?
so yeah, independence journey, or if there's a conversation that could be held, married.
No, Tessa, I'm sorry I didn't recognize you earlier.
I-
No, we cannot be speaking about Grenada in the last 50 years and erase perhaps the most defining 4.5 years. Because when we have to speak about Grenada, we speak about before the revolution and after the revolution. Why? Because it was the most defining period in the Commonwealth Caribbean. And why was it defining? Because if we think about independence as the quest for freedom, if we think about what happened in and I like to use Amartya Sen's work in terms of unfreedoms. Poverty is an unfreedom. Illiteracy is an unfreedom. Lack of access to health is an unfreedom. And if we think about independence not in terms of a particular marker, but if we think about it as a people collectively trying to break from unfreedoms, we can go as far back as Dr. Curtis J. Fox went and fed on rebellion and all of that. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be free? We come to 1951 and Eric Gary is making his mark. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be free? How we breaking, and we have not broken sufficiently. And there was a blow in 1979 in that search, that long quest for freedom, in terms of a people defining themselves in a particular way, being proud of who they are, standing up to the world and saying, we ain't in nobody's backyard, developing a sense of patriotism and a healthy kind of sense of nation. That doesn't mean that the revolution wasn't flawed. But even as it was flawed, there were so many possibilities. And when we look today at our doctors and our dentists and our agronomists and our engineers, the legacy of that period remains. Even as the pain still remains. Even as the psychological hurt still remains. So it was for me the best of times and the worst of times. But nonetheless, critical. In the 50 years, the 4.5 in 50 is a 4.5 that we have to critique, that we have to ask, why did we throw out the baby with the bathwater? Today we are speaking about food security, and Tessa, Dr. Tessa Barry, I know you're an advocate for agriculture. If we didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, how far along would we have been today that we're speaking about food security? If we didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, where would we have been in terms of manufacturing and agro-processing? Today we're speaking about agribusiness. So I don't agree at all with people who would argue that we need to somehow disconnect from our psyche. 4 very critical years, as painful as they were. And I would want to encourage people to look at the plates coming here this weekend. Redemption Time. We saw it last week, some of us. And it really does give a good historical overview in dramatic form of that period and the Gary period before it. So to answer your question, we must remember, we must reflect on, but we must learn the lessons from that period. And I think in learning the lessons about how do you engage in a social democracy and tolerate dissent. Because one of the major failings of the People's Revolutionary Government is that they did not know how to tolerate dissent. So Just as it happened, Gary had opposed the colonials. He fought against their authoritarianism. He fought against their oppression. And then when he got state power, he took on the state form. Yes? They fought against him, against his authoritarian rule, against his oppression. And then when they got state power, they took on the state form because they never changed. They never changed the state form. That was about militarism and authoritarianism and the heavy hand of the state. So even as you were engaging in popular democracy and you had agro-processing plants, you were detaining people without trial. So it was the best of times and the worst of times. And we cannot demonize the period without understanding the possibilities that it provided. But we cannot glorify it to the extent that we don't understand how dangerous it was. So we have to be critical enough to say it was a period where perhaps for the first time, Grenadians were proud to be Grenadian. We stood tall in the world. We had a leader that we respected. And there was a sense of patriotism and voluntarism. There's so many things we could learn from that period. How we could, again, take pride and volunteer and clean up. But at the same time, how do we ensure we have a healthy democracy where all ideas must contend and we cannot be ruled by dogma? And we have to be honest enough. And that's how I'll answer it. It was the best. And it was a long answer. Yeah? Professor Ian Baptiste.
Is it? All right. Good evening, everyone. I want to take us back some steps.
Mike. Oh, it's on. Okay.
I'm trying to grapple with the question you ask about who are we, but I want to take us back a couple of steps philosophically. I want to ask, is it true that independence makes sense? The concept of independence makes sense only in the context of the modern idea of the nation state.
You're asking or you're making your comments?
No, I'm asking it, and I'm hoping that I'm assuming that that's true. Mm-hmm. And Brother Jacob, you might be able to help me out here. If for a moment we deny the concept of the nation state, if we say it has no legitimacy, because we assume that it has legitimacy and it has always had legitimacy, I doubt that was so. It's a modern invention, a fairly modern invention. Right? So I'm thinking, so when we say we, we're referring to people in the nation state we call Grenada. Right? But I'm wondering, why is the nation state premier? Why is it? Rich people don't bother about nation states, most of them. They cross borders with ease. You talk about freedom, they go anywhere. I'm not even being facetious when I raise the question like this, because can we envision a world without nation states? And if we do, what will be the primary unit of analysis?
Professor, answer your question. Tell us your views on that. I know you have some strong views on that.
I don't have strong views, but I think the state is getting in the way. I think the state is getting in the way of the nation. And I'm fed up of it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm trying to get at. I can't articulate it well.
No,
but I wish we could focus on the nation and for a moment forget the state.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so,
I
so
like
for
how-
those of us who don't understand the distinction I'm making between those, let me see if I can clarify. A state is an apparatus that manages the affairs of, a piece of land, a ground. So you have prime minister and president and so on, and it's a legal apparatus. That's what they call a state. In the United States, for instance, there are several nations.
Yes.
A nation comes together by virtue of heritage and culture.
Culture.
There is a sense of we-ness in that nation that don't go away. It can't go away.
There is the state, the community, which is made up of the state, the community, and the apparatus itself. That is basically GT 102 intro to politics back in the day. But there is the question of the state, meaning the state, the community, which includes the state apparatus. That is how, what should I say?
If federation worked, I'm going to push this. I'm really going to push this.
Yeah. No, that's okay.
If federation worked, what would we be?
Well, we don't know.
A nation beyond the territory. And I like how you phrase it, because I too believe that the state gets in the way of the nation. And why do I say that? And I'm agreeing with Professor Batiste. You remember when I
mean, the
said,
state apparatus.
yes, when I said, what did the nation bring to the state? Because there's nationhood and there's statehood, and we conflate them. On the 7th of February 1974, we became a sovereign state, but we were already a nation. And what did the nation bring to the state? And when we fight about yellow and green, and some people afraid to read this color and afraid to read that color, the nation becomes compromised because of the fight for power for the state.
Yes.
Because we struggle for power.
Fight for control of the state
Fight
apparatus.
for control of the state apparatus.
Yes.
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 Because we fight for control of the state apparatus,
Yes.
the nation becomes divided.
Yes.
If we could get to a point where the moment that we have now, where we singing these nice songs and we dancing and we talking, but I love my Grenada. 2 weeks before election, let's sing a nice I love my Grenada now. Because what happens? Generally, we love Grenada when we control it. When we can't control it, we want it to sink. And this is not about one political party, it's about all of them. Across the board. Well, I talk like a real Grenadian here now, across the board. When we can't control it, it must sink. There's nothing good that is happening. But when we could understand nationhood, and Dr. Oliver Benwa was speaking about that earlier this week on one of the GBN programs, when the nation is well formed and we have a healthy nationalism, the fight for control of the state apparatus will have to give way to a mature nationhood. A mature nationhood. When you could stand up to a politician and say, but you must love Grenada first though. This is what matters. And when we could do that, the state becomes subservient to the nation. What we have now is the struggle for control of the state apparatus. I can put my mouth right. The struggle for control of the state apparatus is getting in the way of a well-formed nationhood. And that is the problem that we have to fix. We can't go through to the next 50 years with that tension between state and nation. And that's why sometimes we don't understand the difference between government, party, and state. We don't understand. We fuse them together. And the nation is compromised as a result. Yes.
There are other enemies of the nation besides the state.
Yes, talk about them.
One of them is what Jacob spoke earlier on about a struggle. He talked about 3 struggles that we have. And he seemed to assume that we are struggling with all of them.
No, of the
beg-
three,
I
of the three, two are probably settled, but the third one is
I
problematic.
don't know that colonialism is a struggle for a lot of Grenadians. I just talking plain.
The legacy.
I think a lot of us like it. And I see no reason to struggle.
No, what I meant was, what I meant was that since the colonial period, our economic activity is determined by the needs and the wants of or economic developments in places which are thousands of miles away from us. So, let's take a hop, skip, and a jump, right? So, from by the 15th or the 16th century, the Europeans wanted to smoke tobacco, so grow tobacco, right? Then they say, we want sugar,
Grow sugar.
grow sugar. Then they say, ain't so sure, you know, maybe we want some nutmegs and we want some spices and so on. Grow that. Until 1948. He say, no, boy, I ain't so sure, you know, them winters too long and they invent commercial air traffic and so on. And we want to come and the winters has been so cold and so on. We want to come and cool out down on the beach. Okay? So a whole new industry is created since about 1948, commercial tourism, which is underpinned by, of course, the invention of the internal combustion engine and so on. And they come and they cool it down on the... So,
Yeah, I am talking.
No,
about-
hold on. The period of 1979 to 1983 was an attempt to break out of that. It didn't go.
Right, so-
It didn't end up nice
Yeah, I get
for all kinds of odd reasons. But the leaders of the time consciously addressed those issues.
I agree.
Yes.
Right?
So
I agree, but I'm
Address
not
those
talking
issues.
about the leaders. I'm talking about the rank and file, Grenadian. And so I want to clarify that. When I say a lot of we like it, I don't mean the leaders. Some of the leaders like it too, but I mean the rank and file. A lot of Grenadians who are very comfortable with colonialism and contributes to it. And so how are we going to build a nation when your consciousness is about somewhere else? You're thinking you would probably become a British subject, even today. This is a serious enemy of the nation we're trying to build.
yeah.
Colonialism is a
It's
very
in the
is a
mind.
colonialism has what someone said, an adaptive tendency.
But you know,
That's why
yeah.
that's why it is allowed to survive for the amount of time it has been allowed to survive.
But you know,
It takes different forms.
Okay, I see a hand here. I want to. Yes, gentlemen, you're free. Yes, because we are recording. Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Justin Lima.
It's okay.
And I want to touch on a little bit into the area that you raised, 1979, 1983. Prior to that, I was virtually forced out of Grenada. In simple language, my father said to me, say, in order for me to have a peaceful night rest, you got to get out there. Sick, no problem. By 1987, I was back here. Why did I come back? My philosophy and concept was the safest place for an infant is to be in its mother's arms. So I came back to Grenada. Even though I didn't have any difficulty where I was in terms of landing status. But coming back to your point. If you look at 1979, 1983, you would see something that is very dynamic, very interesting. But for whatever reason, it did not hold one national commercial bank, two MNIB, three NIS, four the airport. These are major infrastructure in the life and dimension of a nation. From that period to now, look at the state of these, if you want to call it institutions. Look at the condition of them. But the nation continue to exist. How and why, I don't think I'm at that level to determine how to bring that up. So my conclusion, looking at the pre-revolution period, and perhaps what has caused it, and looking at the management of the nation, there's one fundamental question to be asked. Was there leadership? Was there leadership? Is there leadership? Or the problem is leadership? But leadership doesn't, it don't exist or happen in a vacuum. It comes from the quality of the individual, the ego and the objective. So if that individual use the, let me see, I use a simple word. If that individual or individuals use a tradition to mask and serve his or her selfish ego, selfish, insatiable ego, then the care is not about the moral and the corporate responsibility, which is the leadership and the nation, the responsibility for the nation. So we have problems. Because that institution or that tradition, which was supposed to set you free from the constraint of the ego, has now become the servant of that individual narrow interest. And this is what Grenada is suffering from. But, let me put this out a little bit. In the depth of that, whatever you want to call it, whether it's stupidity or inferiority or whatever you want to call it, whatever terminology you want to use, there is a kind of uniqueness in the nation that we have to identify, bring it to the fore, and let it cultivate itself. Have a good evening, I'll come back.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes.
And that word, if we think about leadership and nationhood, and we are not thinking about leadership just in terms of political leadership. Leadership in the home. What society produces the type of leaders that we have? Leaders in the homes, leaders in the education system, leaders in the community. Community leaders, leadership becomes very important. Every single politician that we have today came from a home, went to a school, perhaps a Sabbath school and a Sunday school, and there's a community. There's a community that produces leaders. So leadership becomes very important in forging the nationhood that we want and that we deserve. But I see a hand at the front, my sister. And
Yes.
Claude Douglas, I saw your hand too?
Yes.
Oh, his hand was before? Okay.
Now, just wanting to comment what the gentleman was saying, what he was saying, you brought me right back to reading George Brissan's book, Grenada Island of Conflict. One particular sentence, when Brissan wrote, say, the revolution replaced the dictatorship of one man with that of an intellectual elite. That's what, when you say that, that's what I'm reading.
Yeah.
You know, that's, for whatever it's worth, I'm not so sure if George probably understood the full significance of what you wrote by that, you know. But that is, you know, that's what came to mind.
Profound, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we have two hands. I saw Sybil Alexander, I saw Claude Douglas. I don't know which one came first. So, you're closer to the mic. Sybil, I'll take you after. Yes, I think his was first.
Good evening. Sorry to be late. I had sports. Stars. I bleed blue. Sorry about that. I'm happy that the discussion is actually going the way of nationhood. You know, because one of the questions that I came to ask us tonight is how are we going to unite our nation behind national objectives? Because we have the tendency to dissect. And that's why some people, you know, will go on, as Dr. Barry stated, that those who are actually questioning the inclusion of the events of the 4.5 years as part of the 50th anniversary. But they are all part of the tapestry. If you look at a box of crayon, we have different colors. Some are bright, some are dull. And so too is our history. We have some bright parts, we have some dull parts, but they all make up part of the tapestry. And we cannot leave out any because all of them would have contributed to where we are today, right? And it's important that we focus because sometimes you call Gary and there is a tendency of some to look at the negatives more than the positive. You talk about the revolution, there is a tendency for some to look more at the negatives and the positives. But all eras, all stages in our journey, right, regardless of how we may perceive them, all contributed to where we are today, right? Because even though we may have failures under some regime or some era or some system, they taught us important lessons. And we cannot ignore that, right? And this is important. So the theme is a very good one, you know, and we were independent long before I came in late. I don't know if Dr. Jacob mentioned that. We had Amerindian independence, you know. Yeah, the Amerindians, they were independent too. And they actually understood the importance of nationhood, Dr. Battis, because even when attempts were made to colonize them, they fought valiantly, committed community suicide, rather than surrender to the French, right? Because they understand the concept of nationhood and independence. So we also can learn from that as we continue with the journey. You know, it's not an event. Independence is not an event. Yes. It is a journey.
Thanks very much. Thanks. I want to invite
Nice
you
going,
guys. Yes, thanks very much, Brother Claude Douglas.
Thank you. I just want to focus a little bit on the theme that we have here. Yes, we are independent. We now celebrating 50 years. But if you look at an individual at age 50, you would have achieved quite a lot, yeah? You would have had your house, you got married, you have your children, etc. And I think Grenadians got independence without full preparation. We got it, and did we fully understand? Because for years, anytime we wanted something, we looked to people outside to provide it. We have political independence, but are we independent in our mind, in our drive, in our vision for Grenada? I hope we can get there. I like the theme because it says one people, yes we are, one journey. I don't know that we are on one journey. And in order to achieve one future, we must be on one journey together. So it is my hope that the government of Grenada has a comprehensive plan to get Grenadians on one journey so that people understand we all have to work as Grenadians in Grenada or even in the diaspora to lift the country up from where we are. When I look around, sometimes I'm appalled at the rise of the informal sector. Everybody feels free to. They tell you they're a business person, but they put up a little jupa, like people used to put up in the garden. They put it up in St. George's and they tell you they're running a business. In front of a business that's paying utilities, employing people, paying taxes. And they think they have a right, and all we hear, what has become very sexy in Grenada is the poor and vulnerable. I would love for us to move away from that and to have higher goals and achieve more and see ourselves wanting more. You don't want to just, like a peddler, you existing just to eat our food, as they say, to eat today. What's your plan for your future, for your children? People are just having children. Do they know the cost of raising a child? So I would like to see government with a comprehensive plan for the one journey. Grenada, to my mind, needs a vision that's articulated by the government and bring all the people along and somehow get people to have a mind shift so that we can move away and in the next 10 years be a nation that we are very proud of. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Sybil. And if I may comment, that when I spoke earlier about the unfreedoms, poverty is an unfreedom that we still have some unfinished business with. Because there are a lot of people, even as we look back over the last 50 years, and we see in many cases people have used education to break the cycle of poverty, there's still, in many, many, many communities in Grenada, too many people that do not have sufficient access to opportunity. And how do we, in building a cohesive nation, deal with the differences where we are positioned or positionality in the social strata? How do we coexist? And is that coexistence between those who have and those who do not have enough? How then do we ensure policies are in place to lift, to lift, to lift, to lift? And I think for the next 50 years, I too would want to see a shared vision. But I don't think it's the government alone. I think we have to build a more cohesive and stronger civil society. I would want to see communities become more active in their governance. I would want to see women organize around issues that affect women's lives. Because I often say, incest and domestic violence, they're not concerned with yellow and green. Households are affected. And if we could organize across party lines to deal with the issues that confront us, I think we could have a healthier nation. I'll come back to you. If we could arrest poverty, Sybil, because it is real. There are a lot of people who are still very, very poor. I don't have the statistics. What space must they occupy in this country, as they must? And what I like the fact that the government is now saying, you must stay in school until you're 18 and get a skill. I think that's a way, and I see 2 times CC students here shaking their head. That is a way that we could seek to address some of the underlying causes of poverty. You break it with skills building and with education so that people could aspire beyond just merely surviving. Yes? But, so I see 2 hands. I saw Claude,
Yeah,
the
but
gentleman,
if
and yes.
I wanted to take a point to what the sister said just now. You were talking about the government should do something. The fundamental point, the way of our politics is organized, is that we have what is called regular contests to decide who controls the state apparatus. So in the next not too distant future, there's likely to be another contest, and that contest might result in a different political formation, which might decide that the national interest is not what the current, but then previous one is. Right? And I want to bring it back to maybe it's an unfair comparison. Germany, 1945. Now, the Federal Republic of Germany was established in 1949. And there was something called the Basic Law, which was the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Germany, which is called Westminster. And the Basic Law said, this constitution is a provisional constitution. It will only become the real constitution of Germany when all of the other states, meaning in that case, East Germany, becomes part of the Federal Republic. And they said, you can come into the Federal Republic two ways. Individual states can ask to come, or the others can hold a constitutional conference and say, we want to come in. He said, but in any event, the Federal Republic of Germany has no rights of disallowance. It means that, in other words, then, brothers, we're waiting for you. We want to come in the Federal Republic. Yes, we're waiting for you. Come on in. Now, that was 1949. I think Adenauer was the president at the time, or the chancellor. Adenauer went to Willy Brandt. Willy Brandt went to Helmut Schmidt. 41 years outside of 1990, when Germany was reunited, the politicians saw how it would happen 41 years before. It did not change. So by 1990, the German Democratic Republic, which was good friends with the PRG, ceased to exist, and the Federal Republic came into existence in its fullest sense. Now, what kind of people could see something happening 41 years before it actually happened, and they did not even know when? So we could say yes. The current government would say yes, okay, but then another government, another political party comes and say, them priorities you have, those are not ours, right? And you change everything what this last government did. As we are familiar to 1983 in the post-independence period, right? We have all these things that we set up, and then all the machinery sold to other parts of the world and so on and whatnot, right? So we have to address that. Maybe we need to have some kind of a national consensus or some plan as to what are to be Grenada's needs in the last maybe 40, 50 years from the date in which they were formed. And then we have to decide how we're going to do it, regardless of whatever changes in the political formation that may happen. And it's surprising, when I was reading those things back in the day, Adenauer gave way to Brandt, and Brandt gave way to Schoen and Schmidt. I said, but the plan never changed. Right? Why can't we be like that? Why can't we think about something like that?
Well, I'm coming to Claude Douglas. Oh, I saw Brother Willie. We have a national plan that I hope that we would continue to put in.
No, the national plan is
implementation.
supposed to be, well, all the political formations will be present and possibly future will have to buy into it.
Okay. All right. We have to wrap up by 8:30, and it's now 8:15. I want to take, because Mr. Douglas, this Douglas at the front didn't yet speak, I'll have him speak and then I'll come to you, Claude. Yes? Good. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I just would like to focus on one journey, one future. And a lot has been said about nationhood here. And I obviously believe in nationhood. I've been fortunate to look at Grenada from the outside. Most of my adult life was spent outside of Grenada. And as I look at the journey that we are engaging in here, you have to look to see how we proceeding on that journey. And I look at certain things that would get us through that, and what would it be like? I see a big problem in Grenada. And everything that we're going to look at, we have to look at it at performance. How are we going to perform on that journey? We have a problem with work ethic. And no matter what our theory is, what we believe in nationhood and everything, we cannot do it without proper work ethic. And that has almost been imposed on certain people, starting from the lowest strata in our society. I don't like to put people in different strata, but as a primary school child, I remember seeing people coming to work, cleaning the road at 7 in the morning, and 3 o'clock in the evening, they were packing up their trays and walking home. Nowadays, I see people sitting on the road for 2 hours, just looking at each other, chatting, and going back. We can't build a nation like that. This goes on beyond. If you ask someone to help you, they will come for 1 hour. They want to sleep. They want to do everything. They want lunch. They want transportation. And the last thing they want to do is work. I worked the hell, as you would imagine, in the United States to build the United States. And beyond my work, I live in a community where everybody got together. We had to keep the block clean. We had to do things. We needed things in the community. We got together and we work as a community. This Grenada cannot continue, Grenadians cannot continue with this attitude. Dr. Grenada was talking about her 3-year-old niece. It's my 3-year-old niece too. Last weekend, that 3-year-old niece were picking up garbage in Hope. 11 bags of garbage on about 600 yards of roadway. Bottles. People just discarded that. Every bus, you see it going out. We cannot build a society. We cannot build a nation when we engage in that process. We have to reculture ourselves. We were like that once, and we can get back there. But we have to change that culture. People have to learn to go and work honestly. We cannot build agriculture if we can't get people to work. And every farmer will tell you that's his biggest problem. Food security cannot come without workers. Fallow lands would never produce anything if people don't work. So our future is based on that journey, that change in work ethic. And no matter where we go, what tier we have, we want to change that. And I think parties, no party, change of state apparatus, fundamental change has to come to our society. And we have a bad attitude too. I've been almost on a one-man crusade about sand mining. It's been written in the paper since a year ago and more. Hope, the northern end of Hope Beach is gone. The roadway is gone because it's been sand mined. And we've seen that process from telescope to conference. We've never learned a lesson from that. Everybody ignores it. You call the police, they don't have transportation. They wouldn't put a camera, even though you beg them to put a camera, which is the simplest thing to do, right? People just come, they don't care them, they just take the sand and they go. So we don't have a beach at the northern end of Hope now. All we have is seawater and mangroves that's left, and the roadway is broken. And it could have been addressed, but people don't care. People who use the beach don't care. I talked to them about it. We wrote in the paper, everything. We have to get that community involvement. We have to get that awareness. So I know we run out of time, but it's very, very important that our transformation becomes that cultural transformation that we need, where people are going to have that awareness and that consciousness. And with that would come a land policy. We have two resources in Grenada, two main resources, land and human. That tourists and that everything else is not a resource, it's a temporary thing. If we do not have a proper land policy, we're going to see all sort of craziness happen in Grenada, and we wouldn't have place to plant food. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And that ties back very much to the planning, land policy, and how we do planning in terms of what we build where becomes very important. Claude Douglas and then the gentleman at the back. And then we want to just talk about how we bring it all together for the future. Yes, Mr. Douglas.
Yeah,
Thanks, Uncle.
Just I want to go quickly back to poverty. You know, and I see it as a casualty of the grab for state power. And I say this to say that Rings, as you call him, Mr. Salim, spoke about this narrow selfish interest. And if by intentionally keeping people in a state of poverty is a means, because some people grab for power is by any means necessary. And if it means not empowering individual, because what you have seen over the years is a creation of a dependency syndrome. Okay? The more independent, again, we're talking individually now, independent individualism, the more independent people are, is the more difficult for them to be controlled.
Of course.
Right? People like this dependency, politicians in general. So it is important that we understand going forward, talking about the one future. Right? And that's why I love the discussion this evening on nationhood. You hear people talking about, even politicians and leaders here do not understand what governance is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? My cousin here talk about a new political culture. We have to go back. It will take some years, but we have to go back and start from the kindergarten to build that new political culture. Because in the psychic of those who are called adults, it will be difficult to eradicate this kind of dependency, culture of entitlement, you know, but it serves the interests of those who want to see it perpetuate or be perpetuated. All right? So again, it goes back to how much do I love my Grenada? Right? Governance is a continuity. I hear people talk about NNP project and an NDC project, and I ask, what's that? You understand me? Because we can go and differentiate political concepts. NNP never had a government. NDC does not have a government. They have an administration. Okay? And unless we do not define and understand governance and what those terms and concepts mean, you know, our approach will be different. Right? We look at the audience here tonight. Right? And the audience is in those different discussions over a period of time would be dependent on who actually is the ruling party. And unless we do not go beyond this, right? Because as we are now in this era, only 50% or maybe even less of Grenada is really activated. And I think you made mention earlier, you succinctly stated that, you know, because the issue is not really Grenada. The issue is about party. And as the Black Stalin once said, you know, he said that one thing that he wants his people to guarantee is that they will never put party before country. And I think that is Grenada's biggest challenge, post-independence challenge going forward. How are we going to get to that place where we put Grenada first? And if we can do that, that future we are talking about there will be, as the Caribs used to say, a koyaba, a pleasant place.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Yes. We take a final comment, although any one of the TAMCC students want to make a point? No? No? None of the young people have any questions to ask? Not this evening? Okay. Or final.
Thank you. My deepest apology. One, I'm late, as though I didn't have intention of coming. the time I came in. And two, I didn't say who I am. Nevertheless, I'm here. I didn't focus in my first encounter on the theme of the celebration. Remember, I said celebration. And I mentioned that because when you're talking about a nation and independence, every time you reach that point where you recognize that this is the date or day of remembrance of that event, the triggers of a process, which is a journey, you should be reflecting to understand or validate those reflections, to understand your strength and your weaknesses. So you now position yourself to forge ahead. Anyway, one people. I've never seen a green Grenada passport nor a yellow Grenada passport. Never. So the political culture of the Grenadian people really and technically is in a state of mess and we perpetuate commerce. So basically confusion. One journey, regardless to whether it is slack, tight, short, long, dark, enlightened, whatever. The journey is the journey. The mentality of the inhabitants determines the nature of the journey. So if the nation or the people is in a state of confusion, the journey would never be a pleasant one. But it's inevitable, you're always on a journey. So we have to decide what kind of journey we want. One future. You will always have a future. The issue here is, let me preempt that. Yesterday you learned from. Today you live for. Tomorrow you plan. But there is something that comes from all three of them. The lessons we learn. The question is, what do we do with those lessons? So, in my view, it is critical that we stop. I mean, all this confusion, whatever it is, we stop. Reassess our position. Try to understand where we are. Look at all our strengths and weaknesses. What we have. What we need. And the goalposts. In doing that, you need one critical thing. You must know the land on which you rest, or the area on which you rest. You must know that. You must know its economic potential. And that takes me to a point now. You have to come back. You have to come back in exercise like this because we want to deal with the one future. We don't touch that yet, you know.
He's right.
No, we will come back. We will come back.
You have, and not once, twice, because after 1 year of celebration, you're celebrating the 50th anniversary of independence. For me, I think we're not nice. But anyway, let's leave that. that they are in. You ought to come back. Because Grenada has some dark clouds hanging over it. And we need to understand those dark clouds. And we've had to find mechanism to get those dark clouds off. Remember, we're now in a global market. And it should not be selected actors to be on the global stage. Then we same our colonialism. So it doesn't make sense. So once we're in the global market, we have to stand up. You have to be identified, and you must be recognized. So continuity is important to achieve that. We must try to minimize or eradicate anything like voids. And believe it or not, poor and vulnerable is some serious voids in the human endeavor to grow. I must never be inside it. So any kind of leader or anybody that is in a position where the action and decision or decision and action affect the lives of people in general. And poor and vulnerable is your narrative. You're immediately building a structure for destruction. So we have to get that out. What we need to do is create the enabling environment. We're putting that in context. Where every individual, and I would add enabling individual, should be able to go into that environment or fit into that environment. You don't have to tell them to go in there, and you don't have to train them to go in there. Because this is the environment. Because the environment itself is enabling. And they themselves, he or she would be active. And then you have what I would refer to as a rural economy, alive and kicking. We must always be mindful that we have to use the layman language. Everybody's not on the same level. Despite the fact that I believe 98% of the Grenadian people are not stupid. Because each one of them have a smartphone. So you must be smart to operate a smartphone.
Okay. So we have to wrap it up though, because over time.
You have to be smart. You have to be smart to operate a smartphone. So you know you're not stupid. What I think we don't have, we don't have a sense of direction. We don't have a sense of belonging. See you back, one future.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for
Because we have to
your
clap
wisdom.
some stuff
Yes,
like-
we have to talk again, continue the conversation. Thank you very much. And that sense of direction and that sense of community become very important for the way forward. I know we're over our time here, but I really want to thank all of you. I want to thank Dr. Curtis Jacobs for taking us back on that long road. And I want to thank all of you for your comments, for your contributions. I think there's a lot that we can take away in terms of the nation and the state. And as Professor Batiste is saying, sometimes the state gets in the way of the nation. Yeah, we heard about who are we, our sense of identity, our sovereignty, and our legitimacy as a state in the world. But then what does that mean for how we live? We heard about our society and some of the issues like poverty, the unfinished business we have with poverty. We have to come back, my brother, and speak about how do we care for the poor until we give them the boots and the straps, as a friend of mine would say, to lift them up. We have to still care for them until they transition out of poverty. And we cannot miss that point, that they are vulnerable as long as they are poor. How do we have a society that would allow us to aspire out of poverty. But aspiration is not enough. There must be the environment. Policies must be put in place. But we also have to work on the mental shifts that we must make. Uncle Willie spoke about the work ethic and the culture that we have to reshape if we are to go forward. We heard about the environment and what it means when we abuse our environment through land mining and sand mining and otherwise. We heard about lack of good physical planning, where we erecting things all over the place and having perhaps disorder. Even as we have to ensure that we have access to opportunity, that people could survive and make a living, we have to do it with a sense of orderliness. So there's a lot that we spoke about this evening. And in the end, our brother helped us to understand the one people, the one journey, the one future. What does it mean? How do we get to that place where we have a sense of community and a common identity? We heard about a common vision and common plan that we need to have. And I really, again, want to thank all of you who came and all of you who are viewing online for the comments that I know I would read after. And we're really out of time. So we will do this again. We'll come back. After the 7th, we are going around to the other communities. On the 22nd of February, we'll be in the St. Patrick Anglican School, where Mr. Ali Gill would be doing the first in a series of public lectures. One people, one journey, one future. So we would be announcing activities as they come up. This is a whole year of activities where we want to talk among ourselves about ourselves. So thank you very much.
If I take time and I write down all the things that I love on my island, best believe my list gon' be like 5 miles long. Best believe it's love that makes me sing this song. The cleanest breeze on the waters, friendly people meet in every corner. Togetherness and love is what we stand for. We stand for. We stand for.
Oh, island in the sun. Look at how we've grown, how far we've run. 50 years we strong and more to come. More to come. More to come. I'm going higher. 50 years we're blessed with forged in fire. Still reaching for more. Going up, going up, 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 up. Going up, going up, going up, 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 up.
We're going higher. Going higher. As we aspire, build advances, put people together.
Bang, bang, bang.
It's only up from
We'll
here.
take time to reminisce on the richness of our history from the beginning. From the people who came through sugar and change, emancipation, the revolution. Hold on, let's back up on the globe. More than the ice cream and gold. Much more than the nutmeg and the globe. Tell the world we are Grenadians. Oh.
3 islands united as one, blessed with the strength to carry on. We're more than just that island in the sun. Tell the world we are Grenadians.
Higher. 50 years we're blessed with force and fire. Oh, you mean? We going up, going up, going up, 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 going up, going up, going up, 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 up. We aspire, build advances, want people together. Going up, going up, going up, 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 up. Going up, going up, going up, 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 up.
Really and truly, can't find the words to describe what my country mean to me. So much things we take for granted, but so much things they give to me.
Peace and tranquility, family, community. It no matter where we go in the world, just know that the women's where my heart is.
50 years, as you shape for 50 more.
As we strive to reach the goal, like you only bring the goal.
Going up, I can see the vision clear. Sing it out to let the people hear.
Look at how we've gone and how far we've come.
50 years we strong and more to come. More to come, more to come. It's only up from here. More, more, more. Higher,
Like that.
higher.
And higher. And higher.
It's only up coming higher. 50 years we're blessed with ocean fire. Still reaching for more.
We make the curry pity matnik.